The House's October Built is just a poetically punchy name for a horror film, especially one that celebrates the spooky spirit of Halloween. Unfortunately, where I'm from, the alternate title, The Houses of Halloween, just doesn't have the same brooding ring to it, but that's the least of my concerns when dealing with this curiously baffling two-part film intended to be a series, so let's see what the crack is. The House's October Built tells the story of 5 friends venturing on a road trip from Texas to Louisiana during the final week of Halloween to seek out the ultimate extreme haunted house attraction. However, the opening reveals that the final part of the group's recovered footage was captured by a mysterious underground haunt called the Blue Skeleton, who seemingly stalk and harass the group throughout their journey, wearing soulless, sinister masks before leading them to a supposedly dire fate. Now, before we dive into it, if you're not a fan of ambiguity, good news. While the first film might be a tremendously dissatisfying watch, as nothing about what happens is ever explained, in a bid to sustain this cruel, nihilistic sense of realism, the sequel picks up directly after the first film's events to reveal just what exactly happened. However, as you can imagine, in doing so, I feel it robs the film of its disorientating, anxiety-inducing flair, as it constantly leaves you in the dark over whether the elusive blue skeleton are this malicious group of killers, or the whole thing is just an elaborate immersive experience taken to the absolute extreme. Conceptually, The House's October Built attempts to be 2 different films at once. On the one hand, writer, director, and co-star Bobby Rowe suggested that it's a sort of flux documentary exploring behind the mask of haunted house attractions and the culture built around them, thus fitting the name of the film, while on the other hand, it plays off the superstition, conspiracy, potential dangers, and what-ifs inherent to scare attractions that attempt to blur the line between fiction and reality. While conceived as a celebration of the haunt community and their passion for horror and Halloween, as I said in my Hell House LLC video, where I'm from, scare attractions just don't have the same cultural zeitgeist as they do in America, so naturally I'm coming from this from an outsider's perspective with little emotional connection to the experience. As such, I look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments if you're part of the community or have experienced any of these types of attractions for yourself, because my only first-hand experiences are London and Edinburgh Dungeon, but god damn do I crave doing more of these attractions. In fact, to really hammer in the core thesis of the film, Rowe and his co-writer and producer Zach Andrews even co-founded a production company called Haunt Society that specializes in promoting haunted houses and escape rooms globally, thus making The House's October Built seem more like an advertisement for the industry than a fully structured story. This is especially blatant in the sequel when it replicates the exact same formula of the first film of visiting increasingly audacious scare attractions before something bad happens. Essentially, the very cynical way of looking at it is that the film comes off as more of an excuse for Rowe and his friends to have a tax-deductible haunted house road trip by providing a secondhand experience that masquerades as a found footage flick. It's like me making a video on scary planes and booking a private jet just so that I can film the video on, and I might give my accountant a call. Cynicism aside, in fairness, I want to give the film the benefit of the doubt and say it's inadvertently kinda brilliant in using the absence of conventional storytelling to provide scares and suspense outside the filmmaker's control, given they are actually participating in these attractions, and at times it does admirably tap into themes of trust, boundaries, consent, and the ethics behind how far a scare should go before it disregards human empathy. However, before we go any further, let me take a moment to thank this video's sponsor, Vezi. So, I was in Croatia last week coaching at the European Dodgeball Championships, and finding footwear, clothing, and accessories that can serve an all-in-one purpose is the holy grail of traveling lightly. In most places, seasonal weather can be unpredictable, but Vezi's 100% waterproof and wind-resistant overcast coat fights back in style, as it's perfectly tailored to someone like me, who greatly prefers looser, lightweight clothing over rigid, restrictive, bulky waterproofs. The stretchy shell and raglan sleeve design provide comfortable and relaxed freedom of movement, and despite typically feeling overheated in coats while being active, I'm honestly shocked at how well the overcast soft fleece interior provides just the right amount of warmth so I don't feel overburdened when protecting myself from the rain even in warmer conditions. It's a smart, elegant coat with zip pockets to keep your essentials secure, and is perfect for all occasions including formal and professional ones, meaning they pair wonderfully with Vezi's Soho sneakers. These 100% waterproof bad boys are designed with sleek, sophisticated synthetic leather, wax finish laces, and Vezi's signature Dymatex technology for breathability in any weather condition. Their grippy outsole provides safe, stable support for slippery terrain, and their padded collar and cushy midsole is chef's kiss perfect for prolonged wear, especially when traveling, thus providing the convenience of never having to change footwear wherever you go. So, if you're looking for that simple, all-in-one, hassle-free lifestyle, head on over to vezi.com/ryanhollinger to check out Vezi's unique range of footwear and accessories, and get 15% off your order, and in turn be supporting my channel. The House's October Built sets the scene by opening with a quote from sci-fi author Walter John Williams, stating the universally accepted belief that nothing is scarier than what humans can do to each other. It's preceded by an old commercial for the Camden Park haunted house attraction that foreshadows the journey by declaring that you don't know what will happen, with interviews dispersed throughout the film, highlighting myths about scare attractions such as rumors of hiring real serial killers and psychopaths, and using real blood and gore, and OMG, people actually died in these attractions, which tragically has happened, but not the ones that promote themselves as such. The whole idea is to establish the dangers of attractions that require audiences to forfeit their awareness for their surroundings over what's real and what's not, thus igniting the insinuation that perhaps the increasing extremities our characters experience in each scare attraction might actually be real. I'm not convinced it's by design, but I think there is something bold to making a horror film that spoils some sort of inevitable peril for our characters and then never fully draws attention to it until it's too late. It reminded me of The Rental in a way. You expect something bad to eventually happen, but because the focus is elsewhere instead of on the horror itself, it makes you drop your guard slightly without ever feeling fully at ease. It helps recontextualize how we perceive each seemingly mundane attraction, as it plants all these implications, including partial knowledge of how things will end, where Blue Skeleton dump one of the group called Brandy into the trunk of a car, but at the same time, it could all just be an elaborate hoax to successfully scare you, which after all is the job of these attractions. In one interview, Rose specifically called attention to the infamous outlier in haunted house attractions in the US that you could say partially inspired Blue Skeleton, called McCamey Manor, which requires participants to sign a waiver that permits its actors to do literally anything they want to provoke fear, including straight up physical and psychological torture. If you know what you're getting yourself into, it's not my place to say there isn't a market for this sort of boundary-pushing curiosity and masochism. All the power to anyone willing to put themselves through what is invariably a traumatizing experience in order to seek some sort of profound emotion or adrenaline. However, I do agree with Rose's point about how veering into dangerous and unethical territory is probably a disservice to the scare community, because inevitably something with that much of a sensationalist reputation is more likely to attract mainstream media attention and indirectly overshadow and misrepresent positive aspects of the community, which in that respect is something Ro and Andrew seek to rectify. By the way, it's worth mentioning because I imagine this will be a sticking point for many, there is more than enough commentary out there on McKinney's practices that I don't need to add any more fuel to the fire. My main point is that regardless of the intent behind any attraction, there is an immense ethical responsibility that has to be upheld when putting anyone at any sort of risk. As such, while The House's October Built might feel like an advertisement disguised as a film, it does attempt to at least celebrate the cultural importance of horror. I don't think it gives any particularly meaningful insights, but the naturalistic cinema verite approach of seeing good friends put themselves in uncomfortable scenarios for the ironic purposes of fun, and then sharing in the aftercare, consolidates the cathartic appeal of scary entertainment. These attractions essentially give us the controlled conditions to let go of our steadfast survival instincts because we perversely trust those whose job it is to scare us to also somewhat look after us. You know what you're getting yourself into, but there's still a duty of care to make sure your guests are safe and healthy, and so what the group aim to find is an attraction that forgoes regulations and responsibility to bring them out of all comfort zones and into a space where the fear and danger are so close close to real without obviously becoming a snuff film. Their increasingly haphazard and attention-seeking ways, from boasting about their boredom to pissing off scare actors and strangers, builds a slow dread until they eventually get what they've been practically begging for when they're abducted by the Blue Skeleton group and taken to a scare house that serves more of an abstract purpose, let's say. There's a line earlier in the film where one of the group mentions that it's not the contents of the attraction they find scary, but rather being in a strange and confusing situation outside their control. In the Blue Skeleton house, nothing elaborate actually happens, but being forced into a space without boundaries, rules, or any indication of its artifice is enough to simply prey on the unending anticipation and uncertainty. By this point, you're led to assume the Blue Skeleton group are actual killers, as they're suggested to cut out the tongue of one of the group in an alleyway, but it's never shown nor confirmed. What actually does occur is each of them being buried alive in coffins, ending without any indication of what actually happened, other than they've completed their goal of finding the ultimate extreme scare, that is, experiencing their own death. The film is closed off with one final interview with a scare actor discussing how they get into character, and for this one moment in time, they are no longer themselves. They place all their stresses, burdens, and energy into giving people an experience they desperately beg to escape from. We place all our attention into the symbolic victims of such attractions, but it can't be ignored that the villains also seek an adrenaline and catharsis from the other side of the mask, one that's not for us, but for them. Hence, we leave the film with no reward for our experience, as Blue Skeleton wasn't designed for the participants, but rather the perpetrators. Unfortunately, the sequel unravels all that ambiguity, so if you want to keep the mystery to yourself and not have it spoiled, you can leave now, but if you want the canon explanation for what happened, stick around and brace yourself, because it's very much it's all just a prank bro style conspiracy. The sequel picks up immediately where the last film ended when the police arrive just in time to intervene, revealing that the entire group survived, and 1 year later they decide to do it all again on another haunted house tour with their newfound infamy. It's a compelling idea on paper. Instead of it being a hobby, they're actually being paid to attend various attractions and participate in proceedings, under the condition all 5 members attend, especially Brandy, as a video of her in her coffin went viral on YouTube. Since Brandy was left with severe PTSD, she initially refuses until she's gaslit into thinking the real motive behind the quest is to conquer their trauma and come to terms with their experience, when really the other guys just want to ensure their star victim is on board to truly capitalize on their viral trauma. It does try to add some element of commentary by having the characters openly discuss the ethics of extreme attractions and trusting your life in the hands of people emotionally detached from the character they play while scaring you, but I've already talked about how the first film loosely taps into that. The problem is that the dialogue seems improvised and shallow, with the biggest new addition simply being that they now have a fucking drone to play with, and they love using that thing. The sequel's most egregious issue is simply that it does not attempt to maintain any sort of mystery, as it actually shows us the secondary perspective of Blue Skeleton stalking the group once again, including a shot of one of them doing an impression of De Niro from Cape Fear hiding under the RV, and a scene shot from a fucking helicopter. It also uses dramatic music and cliche sound effects, and I was laughing so much that I thought it was trying to be a parody of the first film, like Evil Dead 2 or Texas Chainsaw 2. I appreciate that they look like they're having a lot of fun making it, but given how it literally repeats the exact same plot again, makes me think it might as well have just been a documentary. The whole thing just feels pointless, just another excuse to go on a road trip. They even do this zombie run that lasts about 10 minutes of the movie, and it does nothing for the story. There's no suspense, no sense of unease, no reason to care about these characters given it's already demystified Blue Skeleton. I mean, surely the twist must make up for this, right? Well, oh boy, you're in for something. Eventually, they're once again abducted and awaken at Blue Skeleton's next attraction called HELPHNT, where, surprise surprise, Brandy is again separated and forced to witness each character get murdered one by one, eventually being surrounded by the group, who give her a small coffin containing a gun, which she aims at the men, who in a panic reveal themselves to be her friends all along, and the whole thing was in fact just a prank, only for her to turn the gun on herself. Hey, so it's Ryan from the future here. At this point, I was supposed to go into a 5-minute rant about how this ending makes no sense, but as I was editing it, I began to pick up on what was actually going on, so out of fairness, it's only right I correct my own misunderstanding before moving into my final point about why I like what's going on, even if I still feel it's horribly communicated to the audience. Basically, the big twist is that the men are led to believe that the coffin contains a check for Brandy as compensation for helping Blue Skeleton go viral after their burial in the first film, and the second hoax was just them doubling down on it by taking advantage of her trauma for the sake of further virality. The twist is that Blue Skeleton tricked the men to get the same sincere reaction Brandy had while in the coffin, as a flashback to Brandy's encounter with the masked women, which itself is never explained because it's supposedly being saved for a third film, reveals the men worked with Blue Skeleton to fake the original burials. They've been working with Blue Skeleton in tandem since the very beginning, unbeknownst to Brandy, who is given a fake gun and blood squib to fake her death. Thus, the second twist is that it's all at the expense of the men, with Blue Skeleton essentially playing both sides against each other because that way they end up on top. There are still plenty of confusing and contrived elements, like Brandy incapacitating one of the cameramen to escape, but still stopping to take the camera only for it to mean nothing when she runs outside and is pursued by several other cameramen. Originally, I thought it switched to a cinematic perspective akin to the last broadcast, because Brandy never acknowledges the cameras and it's never made clear how much she knows about Blue Skeleton's further hoax. However, given how both films loosely explore the ethics of scare attractions, I love the premise of exposing how dangerous pranks and hoaxes can become. I mean, it's not a new idea, as we've seen it in other films like Jawbreaker, but around the time of the film's release, pranks were a massive trend. If anyone remembers the Sam Pepper incident from 2015, where they pretended to kidnap and murder someone's friend right in front of them, leaving them evidently traumatized, it highlighted how utterly dehumanizing and unself-aware the obsession with content creation had become. It's a harrowing and timely issue. Just look at how borderline sociopathic people behave for internet credibility on any platform that feeds off attention, and how much we devalue and disrespect people for petty self-gain. Amongst the male protagonists, there's an arrogance on display from the first film. Brandy is just giving them a taste of their own medicine of what it's like to take advantage of someone's trust. As the old saying goes, it takes years to build trust, but only seconds to destroy it. As such, you could say there's an inherent poignance to the ending, especially when the men have the audacity to get pissy about being pranked instead of looking inward at their own deceptiveness. They're so self-absorbed that they're the kind of people I can see rebranding themselves as cancel culture grifters, claiming everyone's just too much of a snowflake these days. Anyway, happy Halloween. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, thank you so much for sticking about. I'm going to be busy with some work-related stuff, so there won't be a video next week, unfortunately, but there will be one the following week. It'll be the final found footage topic for the year. It's just to give me a bit of a buffer zone because I have some kind of cool, unique topics to round off the year with. But I will give you a clue for what that video will be, and that is we're going to be talking about Sydney's underground subway system, because that's right, this channel is pivoting into infrastructure analysis. So until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.